Hello and welcome to week 3 of term. It is time for the Earth topic, lesson 5. Here's a quick starter for you. You can pause the video. You don't need to write this down. Don't copy it out. Just pause the video and think to yourself, do you know the answers to this from last lesson? Pause it now. Okay, here we go with the answers. The gases in air are nitrogen, oxygen, argon, carbon dioxide, and water. The chemical formulas, hopefully you'll recognize from the last lesson. Nitrogen, oxygen, and argon are elements made of one type of atom. Carbon dioxide and water are compounds made of more than one type of atom bonded together. Nitrogen is 78% of the Earth's atmosphere, oxygen around 20%, argon 1%, carbon dioxide 0.04%, and if you were wondering about water vapor in the air tends to vary. Okay, right, we're going to look again at the natural resources that come from the Earth and how we change it into useful products. That is a really important part of chemistry. And today we're going to look at petrol and how we take crude oil from the Earth and change it into petrol and diesel and other fuels. Here we go. Right, now, just stop for a moment and think to yourself, we use a lot of petrol, a lot of cars on the road, a lot of petrol. How does it get to the petrol station in the first place? Right, see if you can pause the video and put these steps in order. So you can just think here or jot down the letters, A, B, C, D, E, F. What order do they go in? Pause it now. Okay, here we go with the answers. Firstly, we drill for oil. We drill down into the Earth's crust, quite often below the ocean, and we get crude oil. That oil is taken on a tanker to a refinery. The refinery splits the oil into useful products like petrol and diesel. They can be stored in tanks before they are then taken to the petrol station for our use. So it comes from crude oil. That crude oil is found inside the Earth's crust alongside natural gas, and we drill down and then we pump it up from below the sea. But how did the crude oil get there in the first place? Well, crude oil originally came from sea creatures that died millions of years ago, and layers of those sea creatures built up on the seabed, and sedimentary rock formed, and that pressed down and compressed the layer of dead sea creatures. And after millions of years, the sedimentary rock formed, but so did crude oil. So as the pieces of rock are compressed together to make sedimentary rock, so the remains of animals and plants are compressed together to form crude oil. So crude oil originally came from animals and plants that died millions of years ago and were turned into crude oil at the same time as sedimentary rock was formed. We can then drill down in order to obtain that crude oil. Okay, pause the video and you can think this or you can say it out loud to somebody. Can you put it into sentences? You don't have to write it down, just think it or say it. How did crude oil form? Okay, here we go with the answers. Dead plants and sea creatures, so animals and plants, died and then formed a layer in the ocean that was covered in rock and compressed, and over millions of years, the animal and plant remains turned into crude oil. Okay, so we find crude oil in the Earth's crust and we can drill it. Right, now let's zoom in to see what it's actually made of. Crude oil is made of a mixture of hydrocarbon molecules. Right, so here's a diagram of hydrocarbon molecules. A molecule is a small group of atoms bonded together. What is a hydrocarbon? Well, a hydrocarbon is a molecule made of carbon atoms and hydrogen atoms bonded together. So C stands for carbon atom, H stands for hydrogen atom. The lines in between are bonds. Okay, so if a chemical is made of hydrogen atoms and carbon atoms bonded together, we can call it a hydrocarbon. Okay, so hydro for hydrogen atoms, carbon for carbon atoms, and they are bonded together, normally in a small molecule. Okay, we can also write the chemical formula. This hydrocarbon has 3 carbon atoms bonded to 8 hydrogen atoms. We give it the formula C3H8. Okay, which is the best definition of a hydrocarbon? A, B, C, or D? Pause the video and decide which is the best definition. Here we go with the answers. It is D. A chemical made of carbon atoms and hydrogen atoms bonded together. Right, now look at A. They are made of carbon and hydrogen, but it hasn't specified atoms. Here it's talked about hydrogen atoms, but it hasn't said that it's carbon atoms. Here it's missed out the idea of being bonded together. So the best definition, a chemical made of carbon atoms and hydrogen atoms bonded together. Now, in your own words, you're going to be writing this down later. You don't need to write it now, but just think it or say it to somebody next to you. What is a hydrocarbon? What did I write for my answer? I said it is a chemical made of carbon atoms and hydrogen atoms bonded together. Okay, now, there are other hydrocarbons, petrol, diesel, and they are made by separating the mixture of hydrocarbons which is inside crude oil. So crude oil is made of a mixture of lots of different hydrocarbon molecules. And in order to change that into useful products, we have to separate the hydrocarbons. This is how it works. The crude oil goes in the bottom of this column. It is heated above its boiling point. So that's about 400 degrees that it gets boiled to, and then it will turn to gas. Okay, so it's heated above 360 degrees to about 400 degrees, and then it changes to gas. The hot gas rises up the column, and as it rises up the column, it starts to cool down. Right, so it's only heated at the bottom. There's no heat at the top, so it gets cooler as it goes up. Now, when it cools down, it gets back to its boiling point. But each part of crude oil has a slightly different boiling point. So as they cool down to their own boiling points, they get colder than their boiling point and they condense back to a liquid. Now, these are called fractions. And fractions are formed at different temperatures because each part of crude oil has a slightly different boiling point. So it will turn back to a liquid when it cools down to its boiling point, and then below that point, it is a liquid. But the different fractions have slightly different boiling points, so they will turn back to liquid at slightly different temperatures. Okay, quite a complicated explanation. Can you get the main point of it? Pause the video and decide if the correct answer is A, B, C, or D. Pause it now. And the correct answer is D. They boil first. Crude oil is heated, so everything in crude oil boils first, turns to gas. Then, as it cools down, they condense. But we say that it condenses at different boiling points. It's always called the boiling point. We tend not to call it a condensing point. It's called a boiling point. If you heat something above its boiling point, it turns to gas. If you cool it down below its boiling point, it turns back to liquid. So it condenses when it reaches its boiling point, and then below that temperature, it will be a liquid. Okay, so we separate the crude oil into different hydrocarbons. Now, one of those fractions, one of those sections of crude oil is called fuel gases. That includes methane for Bunsen burners, but it also includes chemicals which are used to make plastics and other polymers. Petrol is another product that comes from separating crude oil. So is diesel, used for cars, trucks, lorries. Kerosene, that is aeroplane fuel. Fuel oil is what we call ship and boat fuel. Then we have lubricating oil, which is used in engines and bikes to make things turn easier. And then we have bitumen, which is used to form the tar in roads. So there are a wide range of products that we can get from separating crude oil into these different hydrocarbons. Okay, I'll say it one more time. Fuel gases, used for fuels and also to make plastics. Petrol for cars, diesel for trucks, lorries, trains, kerosene for aeroplanes, fuel oil for ships, lubricating oil for engines and bikes to make the gears go round, and bitumen to make the tar on roads. Now, there's a lot to remember there, so here comes a memory test. What are these used for? Pause the video and see if you can remember the uses of these 6 hydrocarbons. Pause it now. Here we go with the answers. Petrol is car fuel. Diesel is fuel for lorries and trucks and trains. Fuel gases can be used as a fuel or for making plastic. Kerosene, used for aeroplane fuel. Fuel oil is what we call ship fuel. and bitumen is used to produce the tarmac for roads. Okay, so just a quick reminder, a hydrocarbon is made of carbon atoms and hydrogen atoms bonded together. Hydro for hydrogen atoms, carbon for carbon atoms bonded together. A small group of atoms bonded together is a molecule. We've seen now the gases in air are molecules, and also now these hydrocarbons are molecules. Small group of atoms bonded together. A mixture is a substance that can be easily separated into different chemicals. Air can be separated into different gases. Crude oil can be separated into petrol, diesel, and other hydrocarbons. Now, using the meaning of those words, can you put all of that together and explain? You don't have to write it down, just think it or tell somebody. Why is crude oil known as a mixture of hydrocarbon molecules? And try to use the meaning of the word mixture, the meaning of the word hydrocarbon, and the meaning of the word molecule in your answer. Why is crude oil known as a mixture of hydrocarbon molecules? Pause it now. Right, let's have a look at my answer. What did I say? Right, it's a mixture because it can be easily separated. When we separate it, we call the products fractions. They can also be called hydrocarbons. It's known as a mixture of hydrocarbons because everything in the mixture is made of hydrogen atoms and carbon atoms bonded together. And all of those hydrocarbons are in the form of molecules, small group of atoms bonded together. So crude oil is known as a mixture of hydrocarbon molecules because it can be separated into different hydrocarbons, which are made of hydrogen atoms and carbon atoms bonded together in the form of molecules, which are a small group of atoms bonded together. And here's a little extra fact for you. The different products from crude oil have slightly different sized hydrocarbons. So fuel gases have the smallest hydrocarbon molecules, petrol, diesel, like medium size, and then fuel oil and bitumen have the largest hydrocarbon molecules. Okay, it is time for the writing task of this lesson. We are going to describe the products and their uses. So think about that memory test. Can you remember what they're used for? Explaining how crude oil is formed in the first place and what a hydrocarbon is. Then using our understanding to explain why crude oil is known as a mixture of hydrocarbon molecules. Then the hardest thing, combining different ideas together to explain how crude oil gets separated. Right, here's how you can lay out your work. You can write the driving question and underline it. Write down the names of the products and think what they're used for. Here are some sentence starters to help you with the explanations and some keywords to help you explain how crude oil gets separated. Pause the video. This is where you will need to write in sentences, put a good effort into your writing, and then we can go through the answers afterwards. But don't look at the answers until you've had a go at writing it for yourself. Then you'll be able to check it, correct it, improve it. But it's really important to write down your own answers first because that's the best way of checking how well you understand it and how well you're learning this. So pause the video and take as long as you need to do your written work now. Go for it, Year 7. I'm about to move this on towards the answers. Answer time. Remember to tick it if it's correct. Hopefully you feel really proud about that for getting science correct. And don't worry if you've got a few things wrong or if you need to add extra detail. You can just write it in now. You are allowed to add extra answers as we go through it. Okay, right. Now here we go with the answers. Fuel gases used for making plastic. Petrol, fuel for cars. Diesel, fuel for lorries, trains, trucks. Kerosene, fuel for aeroplanes. Fuel oil is missing there, ship fuel, and bitumen is used to make the tar for roads. Okay, explaining the main science understanding. Crude oil is formed from plants that died millions of years ago and were buried and compressed underground. The crude oil is made of hydrocarbons. This means they're made of carbon atoms and hydrogen atoms bonded together. If you've missed out any of those words, if you missed the word atom or the word bonded together, write it into your answer. Make sure it is there in your notes for when you look back at this and revise it later on. Using our understanding to explain a situation, crude oil is known as a mixture of hydrocarbon molecules because it is made of a mixture of different sized molecules. Because it's a mixture, it can be easily separated. A molecule is a small group of atoms. Each molecule is a hydrocarbon made of carbon atoms and hydrogen atoms bonded together. Okay, the mixture can always be separated out. I've added an extra point here that there are weak forces between the molecules. We didn't really talk about that earlier, but that is true. Crude oil can be separated into different hydrocarbons like petrol and diesel. Make sure in your answer you've got the meaning of mixture, can be easily separated, the meaning of hydrocarbon, made of hydrogen atoms and carbon atoms bonded together, and the meaning of molecules, a small group of atoms bonded together. Okay, then the hardest thing, combining ideas together to explain how crude oil gets separated into different hydrocarbons. We heat the crude oil mixture until it boils, so it needs to be above its boiling point at around 400 degrees. The hot gas rises up the column. As it rises, it cools down. The different hydrocarbons in crude oil have slightly different boiling points to each other. When they cool down to their own boiling point, they condense back to a liquid. So different hydrocarbons condense at different temperatures, so they can then be collected separately from each other. A hydrocarbon collected in this way is called a fraction, and we give the name for this overall technique as fractional distillation. Distillation involves boiling something and then cooling it down until it condenses. You'll learn more about that at GCSE. Okay, today I have achieved. What have you been able to achieve, and what does that say about you as a science student? Are you able to show correct science understanding for green? Are you able to use your ideas to explain the situation? Can you combine difficult ideas together? So today I achieved describe. Describe the products and their uses. Today I achieved explain. Explain how crude oil is formed and what a hydrocarbon is. Today I achieved use, because I can explain why crude oil is known as a mixture of hydrocarbon molecules. Today I achieved combine, because I can explain how crude oil can be separated into different hydrocarbons. Okay, well done for your work today, Year 7. I hope that you're doing these writing tasks properly, because that is really, really good for your learning. Well done for marking it and considering what you have achieved. And tell somebody in your house what you've been able to achieve. Show them your work. I'm sure they'll be really pleased and proud with you for actually doing your science work. And we are really pleased with how many Year 7 students are getting on well with this work. Please remember, you now need to go back to Show My Homework, click on the Show My Homework entry for this lesson, click the quiz. There is a 10-question quiz for you to do to assess your understanding of this lesson. And we are keeping track on how many students do that. So please remember to go back and check Show My Homework and complete that quiz. Well done for your work today, Year 7. Look forward to next time.